Welcome back to RNN's continuing coverage of the impeachment trial of President Donald Trump. I'm Andrew Whitman. The Senate has just voted 51 to 49 not to have witnesses in this trial as it continues. The trial now really close to wrapping up, though they're working out the timing, and each party is currently caucusing amongst themselves behind closed doors. That's why there is no activity happening on the Senate floor right now. We assume both parties are trying to negotiate exactly how they want the end game of this impeachment trial to play out. And we understand that one of the sticking points they're navigating right now is figuring out exactly when senators will have a chance to speak and give their take and explain their votes. Of course, senators have been gagged and barred from speaking from the floor of the Senate since this trial began last Tuesday. So there is clearly a desire from the senators to make those comments. While that's going on and we are waiting for the Senate to resume, we're starting to do analysis here. We also will be taking your phone calls. You see the number that's on your screen. We want to know your thoughts about the trial itself and about the decision not to have witnesses. I'm joined on the panel here by former federal prosecutor Roland Riopel, who we've had on the program a number of times, but it's nice to have you in studio. And across is Rick Ungar, who is the host of the nationally syndicated radio show, the Rick Ungar Show, who we've also had on the program many times, but first time in studio.
Here we are.
And, gentlemen, I had four questions. It's not Passover yet, but I had four big questions going forward that I hope we'll address. One is the impact on the institutions of our government. Does it change the way our government works in terms of oversight, where the Congress's role is there? Second is the impact on elections, both the White House, the race for the White House this fall, as well as control of the Senate. We'll get to that a little bit later. I think there's going to be some pointed questions at Joe Biden as a result of all of this, and I think that's an interesting topic for conversation. And then the one that we heard both Ron Wyden and Senator Blumenthal mention just before the top of the hour, which is what happens to Donald Trump now that he has this extra, he doesn't have extra power, but he doesn't seem to have any more guardrails on him anymore. And I want to start there. Roland, if it's almost like the kid who, once the babysitter goes to bed and the kid feels like he can get away with anything. Are we blowing that up into too much, or do you think that the takeaway from Donald Trump is going to be, nobody's going to tell me what to do, so I can do pretty much whatever I want? He said as much about Article 2.
Yeah, I think that's sort of been his attitude all along, and this can only make him more emboldened in that respect. I can't imagine that he's going to feel any chagrin over the result of today's proceedings. So he's going to keep right on, soliciting help from China, Russia, and any other foreign power that'll intervene in our election on his behalf.
Now, the impeachment trial is going to end either today or within a couple of days, and he's going to be acquitted. But there are other cases in other courts that remain active. The Don McGahn case we're waiting for, the Supreme Court's just scheduled a hearing on his finances. How much danger is out there in what we know in the cases that are still in process, potentially for this president?
Well, I think there's a ton of information that'll drop between now and November. And each time there's a significant information drop, the press will be energized and publicize it, and hopefully the cumulative impact of these information drops and the proceedings to impeach will impress enough of the independent voters in enough of the swing states to swing the election to the Democratic candidate, whoever that might be. We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out, but I think that's the hopeful scenario.
What are the constraints on Donald Trump at this point? Because he hasn't exactly been sensitive to the desires of Democrats or independents since he's taken over as president.
He's not sensitive to the desires of his own people. Look, you talk about guardrails with this president. There were never any serious ones. The only thing that approached guardrails were the original White House staff who actually came into the job believing, well, they could talk to this guy. They found out that they couldn't, and they're all gone. All that he has now are people who are very good at, yes, Mr. President, and that's not guardrails on any president, by the way. So he hasn't had guardrails for quite some time. I actually don't think that the acquittal from impeachment is going to have a major impact on that. Obviously, had he been convicted, that would have had a very major impact on it. We wouldn't have needed guardrails on him. I don't think it's going to have that much. And I think what's going to be interesting as we go down the road here, the things you were talking about, Roland, they're out there. There are things out there, but they're not legal. They are political. And the test now is going to be, all right, what is hanging out there that could really create a political disaster for this president? But we have to start analyzing that from the point of view that we know that there are 42% of Americans. There's no such thing as a political disaster with Donald Trump. If he does it, it's all good. 42%. So look at the very thin margin of people we're talking about that have to be impacted by whatever political danger might be there.
If that's accurate, it makes me think that maybe his finances could be the biggest. I mean, if we get
Would
a look
that
at
change a Trumpy?
Would that change a Trump? If it turns out that he doesn't have the money that we thought he had, or questionable sources of his income, you don't think so either?
No. I think what we're seeing out there is, sort of the last gasp. At least I hope it's the last gasp of white male supremacy and control of the political system, and to the extent Mr. Trump is doing something obnoxious or is not really qualified for the role he has or not carrying it out appropriately, he is actually affirming the beliefs and the hopes of his supporters. They all believe, or many of them believe and hope, that all you have to be is a white man to be a success in this country. And no matter how clay your feet might be, no matter how phony your billions might be, as long as you are in that role, you are affirming their core belief, which is you gotta be a white man.
And I'll add one thing to that. You're absolutely right. The one thing I would add to that is, and it's the Democrats who've been holding me down.
Yeah, and so if his grades from Wharton come out and we find out he got all C's, and I suspect that's what we would find out.
I don't think he got
that
all
would
C's.
be that would be an affirmation of what they must believe. And if his taxes come out and it turns out that he's owned by Russian gangsters and he's not a billionaire, he's barely a millionaire, that would be an affirmation.
Man's got to make a living.
Oh, yeah,
right?
That would be an affirmation of what these folks want to believe.
I agree.
So there you go.
We continue to wait for the Senate to come back into session. Both parties are caucusing right now as they try to figure out how we're going to complete this night and how we're going to complete this trial, whether it will happen tonight or whether it will happen over a series of days early next week. There has been some reporting that the procedures would be in place Monday, Tuesday, and a final vote would come on Wednesday, though that remains to be seen. As we wait for the Senate to gavel back into session, we're going to go back to the phones. You see the number, or we're going to put the number on your screen, and we're going to the phones now. We'll start with Cynthia, who's calling us from Laurel, Maryland. Cynthia, what's your reaction to the vote you just saw in the Senate and your overall view of the trial itself?
I am deeply disappointed. I'm just totally taken aback by this vote. I cannot believe that this president has just total disrespect for the rule of law, and I cannot believe that in my lifetime I lived to see this. I just thought that our country had come so far, but I see that we have a long way to go. And trust me, I will be making sure that I get out 10 times 10 people to vote come November, because Donald Trump has to be removed, period. Whether it is done at the ballot box or done by impeachment, he's got to go. There's no way that, and right now the most important thing that besides this catastrophe is this whole influence from outside our country for the election. I'm an election judge, and I can tell you that I witnessed tampering. I witnessed election tampering. I saw it firsthand. So, I mean, this business about, that there was no way to track whether or not there was an influence in the election, that we couldn't overturn it and redo the election. That's I don't know. That, to me, I think that is the most serious, egregious thing that we have to face right now as a nation. We have to.
Thank you very much for the call. Appreciate the comments. I don't think redoing an election was ever really going to be in the cards. But Roland, she did mention something about the president's disrespect for the rule of law. And I wanted to ask you about this because if somebody just started tuning into the impeachment trial, having not followed anything with the Trump presidency, there were a lot of arguments from the president's lawyers that the House had disrespected the rule of law in terms of how it pursued this impeachment, in terms of the access or the opportunities that it gave the White House or the president's legal team to defend the president, to call witnesses. What was your reaction when you heard those arguments, and was this a fair process for the White House?
These are arguments that no responsible lawyer would have the cojones to make in a real court of law. Because I'll recall for the viewers the fact that Jerry Nadler invited the president and his counsel to attend the hearings in the House.
He didn't have to.
Yeah, and he
People
didn't
don't
have
get
to.
that.
He didn't have to. He invited the president and his counsel to attend the hearings. The hearings included witnesses called by the minority, the Republicans. This was an eminently fair process, and they offered all kinds of procedural advantages to the president, which he declined. And I will go to my grave remembering that one congressman, I think he may have been from Maryland, down front, who said, come on down, Mr. President. We'd love to have your testimony. Nobody prevented the president from testifying in this case. He could have done it. And if I was Adam Schiff and I was standing up tomorrow to sum up in this case, I would tell the Senate, you must draw an inference against the president because he refused to testify. He refused to produce evidence. People who do that are guilty. This isn't a criminal case, and you are permitted to draw a negative inference against him in this proceeding because of his failure to participate.
Well, I got to say, you're so right, but this has become a pet peeve to me. The people who come up and say, but the president was denied due process in the House of Representatives. Guess what? There is no due process in an investigation. I will constantly say, really, you think when they're investigating somebody for murder at your local police department, they're sweating out his due process rights? No. When you get to a trial, that all changes. He had no due process rights, as Roland pointed out. Nevertheless, they offered him opportunities that he chose not to take up. Enough with this due process in the House stuff. Doesn't exist.
I just want to narrate as we're seeing some senators milling around behind the scenes, so that's an indication that their caucuses may be ending and we may be getting a resumption of the Senate session. Roland, you wanted to respond to that, to what Rick was saying.
Yeah, I agree with Rick that the president got all the process he was due in the House and more, and he declined to participate. And ordinary common sense tells you that someone who declines to participate in a situation like that, someone who refuses to testify, is likely guilty. And this is not a criminal case. In a criminal case, the jury is instructed. You can't draw an inference against the defendant based on his refusal to participate. But in civil litigation, you're allowed. And this is a civil case.
You sound convinced, Roland, that if this trial had been held in a regular courtroom, in a regular court of law, they would have had a much different result.
I think so, yes. I don't think we would have heard the bogus hearsay objections that the Republicans made all along. There was lots of firsthand testimony about the president's misdeeds, and there was much testimony that was characterized as hearsay, which is not. And so, yes, if it was a real court of law with a responsible jury, I don't think they could return a verdict other than he must be removed from office. I don't like the terminology, honestly, Andrew, of acquitted or guilty. This isn't that proceeding. I would say that what happened here was more like a hung jury than an acquittal, because in a federal criminal case, to get an acquittal, you have to convince all 12 jurors to vote not guilty.
I'm very curious what Roland has to say, because he's far more experienced in a courtroom than I am.
Yeah.
But what was really getting me was, as these accusations of hearsay were being slung about, half the time they were inapplicable. And it almost seemed like in all the other occasions, I could easily find an exception in the rules of evidence.
I think that's true. I think the vast majority of the evidence and the testimony that was given was either firsthand knowledge or within a hearsay exception. And in any event, the rules of evidence actually provide that in a hearing like this, the rules of evidence don't apply.
Exactly.
Precisely. So all this talk about hearsay is irrelevant.
We continue to wait for the Senate to gavel back into session. We're going to take a quick break here while we do. As we come back, we'll have the latest from the Senate floor. We'll also take your phone calls. The coverage continues right here on RNN right after this.